Hi, I'm Mike and Ed. This is episode 2 and...
So what's in it for me today?
Well, I'll tell you, let me explain. Today, how you could strike more than £1,000 off your funeral bill, and it's by doing something you've almost certainly never heard of, because they didn't tell you about it. Plus, this funeral approach is perfect for families who just don't want fuss and bother, families who hate all the extra pressure to make a decision right now, families who want to create something extraordinary in their own time.
A simple funeral podcast. Saying goodbye the way you want to. You've got this. Here's Mike Kinnaird.
Once upon a time, you know how these stories work. They start at the beginning. Well, that's actually not strictly true. Sometimes they start halfway through, because sometimes the story isn't always neat and tidy and you have to wing it a tad in the telling. Now, this one is far from straightforward, because it's likely you've not thought about it, because maybe you've never heard this one. But before we dive in, a few pointers as to how this series will work. I'll explain it this one time, and then we're done for all episodes that follow. I know in the great history of podcasts, it's generally assumed they last 30 minutes, I don't know, an hour, and go into every nook and cranny of everything. But let's be perfectly honest here. Who wants to listen to some half-wit drone on about funerals for half an hour at a stretch? I don't want to hear me for that long, for goodness sake. So all these episodes are bite-sized. Some might survive 10 minutes or more, others 5. Some might scrape the 3-minute barrier. So there's no worthy essays, just in case you're disappointed. They're ideas that come to my mind. One idea, one thought, a suggestion at a time. Maybe a couple at a go, to see if we can create a creative approach to a funeral, or the goodbye, or that celebration, depending on your choice of words. So that's what's going to happen from here on in. Every Thursday is my thinking, but you know how these things work. Anyway, let's move on. Back to the story. I know I shouldn't tell you the punchline before we've even got to sentence 1, but I can't wait. The punchline is that by doing what's suggested here will help you create something quite extraordinary, because it buys you time. Time you wouldn't normally have arranging a funeral. And the final punchline is that by accident, as I mentioned at the start, you can save an extraordinary amount of money. £1,000 plus, maybe even £2,000, that could be diverted elsewhere, or it could mean you were affording a celebration or not in the first place. There's no funny gimmicks here, it's just the way it unfolds. There's no shortcuts. Now, have you heard of a direct cremation or a direct burial? It's not a particularly pleasant phrase, but that's what it is. Now, you may have come across this purely by chance, because it's hinted at in some mainstream TV commercials here in the UK. They're more likely to call it a simple funeral or something similar, or just not mention it as such and hope you catch up on the thinking and work it out by yourself. Well, a direct cremation is where you say goodbye to your loved one, probably at a funeral director's, and that's your final involvement for now. You don't go to the service or ceremony, because there isn't one. Your loved one is taken to the crematorium with care and with respect, and you've already said your goodbyes. You now have the time and the space to create a different kind of goodbye, to create a moment, a ceremony that reflects who that person was, what you imagined they would be comfortable with. A surprising, creative, emotional, funny, completely unique goodbye that couldn't possibly be copy and paste someone else. It's unique, absolutely unique. They were an individual, so why can't their goodbye reflect that? It's quite possible you haven't been told about direct cremations out of culture, out of habit, or that somebody sees it as a threat to their revenue. Now, direct cremations are becoming more and more popular, in part according to Ziggy Stardust, or David Bowie anyway. Don't take my word for it, let's go to the Lee Fields Crematorium in Lincolnshire in the UK and talk to manager Deborah Balsden.
Become very popular in recent years after David Bowie made it quite public, really. He did not have a service, he wanted a direct service. The current trend which is increasing, is over 2% of all funerals take the direct cremation route. And then, of course, we have some people that just want an earlier, more simple service. So trends are changing towards direct funerals now anyway.
So you didn't know about this? Well, I mentioned it on my own personal Facebook account recently, and comment after comment from switched on people. I've never heard of direct cremation, they said. So there must have been others that didn't respond, because rarely is it offered as an option. The Sun Life Cost of Dying report in 2018 spelled it out. CEO Dean Lamble said, "The current low take-up of numbers suggests, quote, a lack of awareness rather than a lack of willing. In fact, 2% of UK funerals are direct cremation, but the numbers are climbing, as Deborah just told us, and they've been continuing to climb during this COVID-19 outbreak that's happening as I'm talking right now." And Deborah would know about that. Dean Lamble says according to his team's findings, almost half of the people who recently organised a cremation hadn't heard of direct cremation. Why? Well, as I said, part cultural maybe, part cash. Someone not making the profit they did, possibly. The numbers, though, are just extraordinary. And according to that Sun Life report, almost half of those questions would consider a direct cremation stipulation for themselves. And more bizarre still, while the cost of the average funeral is climbing year on year, something like 6%, the cost of direct cremation continues to fall, so that gap will only increase. Golden Charter has one of the largest networks of independent local funeral directors in the UK. Now, to quote from its website, "Without the time pressure of a formal funeral service, family and friends are free to plan a memorial service at a time and in a place that suits them." So, at a glance, the direct cremation can look an unfeeling, clinical and uncaring option. The truth is, though, it's a highly attractive option to more people every year. Now, as I said, I'm recording this during the COVID-19 pandemic, and right now, this could be the only choice available to very many families because the decision will have already been taken out of their hands. Well, if that was you, then don't consider this second best. Don't live with that thought, because it isn't. You can arrange a goodbye anywhere you like at a place that reflects the loved one you're saying goodbye to. But maybe this would be the option you prefer, even in the good times. You said goodbye. Now you have the space to create something quite incredible, and that's a powerful thing. What that could be, how it works from here on in, and where and when that could take place, and get this, how you could save even more cash, big time, is something we'll talk about another time. It's too much for one session now, it's a lot to take in. So rewind, listen again, or leave it and try another day. But let's get this bit in our heads first. It's a goodbye with no service or celebration. That comes later. And we'll revisit this with a part 2, I don't know, maybe even a part 3, sometime soon, so you've got to keep listening. On the next episode, can I make a funeral absolutely personal and not include an outsider? Can I really write and deliver the entire funeral service myself? Are you kidding me? Well, Alistair did, and he'll tell you how and why in episode 3.
That was another Simple Funeral podcast with Mike Kinnaird. Any way we can help you, then email Mike right now. Mike@thebestspeeches.com. Mike@thebestspeeches.com.